Darkloopsproductions, Surviving The Last of Us. I'm Dr. Scott Jordan, aka Zombie Scotty, cognitive psychologist, philosopher at Illinois State University.
And I am Dr. Leandra Parris. I am, as of today, Associate Dean and Director of Diversity and Inclusion for the School of Education at William & Mary.
An associate dean who loves zombie movies, by the way, so look out. So we've come together today to discuss episode 2 of the HBO series, The Last of Us, Infected. We're pleased to have on the show with us the one, the only, the OG She-Hulk, Dr. Shelly Clevenger. Shelly, please tell the audience a little something about who you are and how you like the show so far.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I'm Dr. Shelly Clevenger. I'm the chair and professor of victim studies at Sam Houston State University, the first and only Department of Victim Studies. I have to say that every time. And I love the show. I was nervous about watching the show because I feel like we've had a lot of this post-apocalyptic type shows, and some of them I love, some of them I don't love, but I love this one because it's more about the people and the humanity. And I love your podcast, because I listened to it on the way to work. And I loved that you both were honest. Leandra said she was going to kill a kid, take their supplies. And I was just like, I love that you two both say what you feel and what you would do. And Scott, you brought up Why the Last Man in the first episode.
Yes.
Which is my favorite portrayal of any sort of apocalypse. I love that graphic novel. So I'm loving the podcast, and I'm thrilled to be. I'm your first guest. So
you are the first guest, Dr. Shelly Clevenger, sporting that skeleton T-shirt and doing it all.
You have my Skeletor on today.
I love it. Well, I'm so glad you mentioned Why the Last Man, because actually that was my first reintroduction into American comics. And I fell in love with the story, and I thought, damn, the world falls apart no matter who's in charge, right? And I watched that show for a little while, but I got to admit, I did not go back after 4 episodes or so. Did you guys watch Why the Last Man? No,
so I just read the graphic novel.
Yeah, it was fantastic. Yeah, Brian Vaughn did that. He's doing Saga now, which is utterly off the hook. Anyway, so we'll start with our special guest.
So I thought a lot about this, and I actually made a little Word document, so I made sure that I got it correct. My academic, my favorite character is the professor, Ibu Ratna, Dr.
Oh, yes.
At the beginning, she was my favorite in this episode, and the line that she says, start bomb this city and everyone in it. And then she asked to be taken home to be with her family. And so this was my favorite because when it first opened, I actually said to my husband, I'm like, I'm so glad that I don't have a PhD in something that the government would kidnap me for.
No joke. Yeah, no.
No one's going to kidnap me unless they want to treat people better, treat victims better, so no one cares. No one's going to kidnap me for that. But I also loved the honesty, like I said about Leandra, like she didn't even sugarcoat it. She was just like, there's no way to stop it. We're going to have to bomb it. And then she just wanted to be with her family because she knew what was coming. And so I loved it. And it was honest. And sometimes as academics, we try to sugarcoat or we try to make it sound fancier. And she was plain and she was straight. And she was like, we got to bomb the city. There's no hope. Those are all my favorites all at one time.
I love it too, because it was like, it would have been so easy for her to be like, no, it's fine. And then just like left. And it was like, peace out, right? Like, I think the courage and the bravery it takes to, like, in that moment, so quickly assimilate the truth of the situation. And I love the little piece they give you about, like, it started at a flour factory. I'm like, oh shit, that's food. Like, now it's all up in the food. Anyway, it was just one of those things where, like, you have a flashbulb of like, oh, like, they're not beating it over your head in terms of like how this started.
Yeah.
They're keeping it true to like the human side of like, here's this woman who's like, you know what, I never thought that you would ever need to kidnap me to talk about mushrooms, but you know,
Yes.
so I agree that I
Yeah.
mean, in terms of like openings, this show is really setting the bar high.
You know, listen to you all talk. I think they're probably going to keep that up. The pre intro
Yeah.
will be something from somewhere else in the world, which gives them a World War Z vibe that, you know, Walking Dead didn't have. Walking Dead was always trapped in the forest, and it just got, they tried to make it feel claustrophobic. It just got a little, but this idea of including all the world. Here's what I love about that scene. Whenever I think about that second episode, I don't remember that scene. But when I watch it again, that scene blows me away. And it's science. And it's the science. I know the science so damn thoroughly that, just bomb. And here's what I'm looking at this scene. You've got a woman of color, PhD, saying something we would not expect to hear out of a sugar-coated liberal worldview. And there's the guy in the military who's just sitting there listening to her, and she is scaring him. I just love the way they acted that whole thing. It just turned tables on traditional tropes of masculinity and femininity. And it's about the science, baby.
Yeah.
Bomb the shit. Just do it now. So if they keep up those little, you know, international blips everywhere, I think that's just really smart, and it'll keep us, it makes the world bigger.
Yeah, and I hope they let her go home. That was my thing. I was like, she gets to go home, right? Like at the end, because they don't show her actually going home, right?
No, they don't show her going home, and it depends on who's in charge of the military, right?
Like, I hope she gets to go home. That was my worry. I hope they weren't like making her stay.
Yeah,
And the acting.
I mean,
the
at this
acting they
point,
got out of that scene
you're
is
gonna
fantastic.
bomb, right? Like, just who's gonna tell? Like, just
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. If they're going to bomb, right? That's, I mean, what I did like about this episode, I think it was an episode where they came across a bomb crater, and Ellie asked, you know, about it, and Tess told her that this is what they did, and it worked here. And I'm thinking, it worked there. Look at that place. It worked there, but it didn't work in other places. So, but I don't, you know, some people aren't going to pull the trigger, and that's where all the different styles of leadership come from. And I loved it. How about you, Leandra?
So I promise this won't be my trend of always like picking the character who dies, but for a lot of the same reasons as Shelly, like Tess for me was really it for this episode. I love that up until this point, Tess has really been hardened, cold, calculating, transactional, like give me my battery, right? Which has been, yeah. So, and I think to watch her and Joel both have different reactions to the possibility of Ellie and what Ellie means was really interesting. Like, she was very pragmatic and like asking questions. And then when she's bit, instead of being like, woe is me, here it goes, I'm gone, whatever, it doesn't matter, I'm leaving, you know, whatever. It's very much like, I'm going to use this as a chance to prove to Joel that this is worth it. Like, look at her bite, look at mine. You can tell she's immune. Let me convince you. And I like that the way she handles it at the end, where she doesn't get afraid when all the zombies come in, and she just stands there and look. And that whole scene with the kiss thing, like, beautifully done. Gross. Ghost is all get out. I was like, ugh. But like the whole idea of it, just like I don't know if it like recognized in her that she was already bit, and so it was just assimilating what was already it, or if it was like, you're not fighting me, so I don't have to be violent with you, so I'm just gonna go. You know, so I think that the whole side of Tess that came out, again, similar reasons, the courage, just the pragmatism, the cool head when like other people are not having, like another dude is like not exactly thinking straight. Just really well done. And it's so nice to see Anna in that role as well. You know, I was a huge fan of her in Fringe and again in Mindhunter. And so she's just playing a whole different, like, oh, it's just so good. Everything about her is so good.
They're Ned Starking the hell out of me in this show, right? I mean, all these fantastic characters coming and going, and I think she kind of paralleled that woman from the opening scene, where she instantly gets it. She doesn't have to go through a whole bunch of mental machinations to, oh my God, it's just like, oops, no, you got to get out of here. I'm not. It's best if I just pass here. I'll stop them, slow them down for you, and. That damn lighter better work, and them. I also, interesting you mentioned this, the creatures. We actually got more out of the characters of the creatures with that whole scene, right? Because they're plants, they're a living system, and they're not going to expend energy. They don't have to. So why would I expend energy running to chase you if you're not moving? So I like the fact you said that, because it gives us a little more about them. Plus the fact that there's vines growing underground, and they're basically all pod systems all over the city. Man, I love that stuff.
I love the science. I love that they keep to it. Like, you can tell they really went, and they were like, this is actually what happens. Like, fungi have miles of a network that expand. Like, that's not something that someone made up in their brain. That shit exists. And like,
it does.
It's one of the few times where I've like watched a zombie thing and I'm like, you know what? I could actually see this being like, this is feasible. I'm not saying it's actually feasible, because I mean, like, come on, but it is really cool. Like, the idea of like having to watch where you step, and like the little vines communicating, and I loved all of it.
I'll tell you what, hearing you say all that there now makes me feel there's something very deep buried in this story, particularly with the character of Joel, because Joel's kind of an individualist, right? Joel's got his, like we talked about, his bubbles here, and he's learning about his connectedness to everything else through Tess's actions. And at the same time, he's got this living example of this mold, right? This fungi that just lives that way. And slowly but surely, there's a story about connectedness in there, even though it's in a creepy story. And Joel's are kind of, dare I say, they might be taking a certain form of masculinity and driving it from its individualism to a sort of recognizing dependence and stuff. So I don't know if that's built into the story. Good for them, because all these.
Sorry, Scott.
No, please go ahead.
I was to say, they gave like the teaser after the episode, and we're gonna see Nick Offerman and like the kind of encampment together, and we get to, I'm excited to see Joel be at least part of a group for a little bit there. But I'm excited to listen to your podcast for next week's episode. But like, when they'd say to Nick Offerman's character, like, oh, you better watch out, like these people are gonna come, and Joel's still very much like individualistic, like you gotta watch out, and he's like, we'll be fine, and then they like show how he's not fine. My hope for the show is that Joel does get more of that community mindset. I don't know that he will, right? But it seems like they showed that, and it's like, oh no, we're great here, and he was like, it's not going to be great for you all. And so you're right, like his individualistic is like, we're gonna survive, me and whoever's with me. Blinders, not thinking about the outside world, which I think is like dead on. And you said that last episode, and I'm thinking it's going to be a theme.
And he'll keep moving around with people with different sized bubbles, and that'll reveal more and more about him. And I'm not experiencing this character as toxically masculine. He's a caring guy. It's just his bubble's small. What do you guys think? Is he toxically masculine? Is that a bad thing to ask? Or?
I will say, like, given he and Ellie are supposed to be like the main characters, we've actually gotten the least amount, other than the death of Sarah. Like, I think we're unfolding. I think you're right that he's in the moment, and I don't know that he's the same person from moment to moment. And so I don't know that we've seen him interact enough to really get a good sense of what that masculinity looks like.
Yes.
I don't read it as toxic so much as like hardened after the death of a child. But I think that is also, I don't know how much of that's fueled by like what I know happens in the video games, because I still playing it and playing it so many times. So it's like everything for him comes back to that internal need to protect the daughter that he couldn't, which to me is more parent driven, caregiver driven, as opposed to like a masculinity thing. So I don't know. The way it is now, I'm frustrated with him because I'm like, of course Ellie is like the cure, right? But I also feel like if I were in his position, I didn't have any reason to live beyond the moment that I'm in, I don't know that I would behave any differently as a woman. Right?
Yeah.
So
well, they've done her role, all these roles that they're giving screen time and lines to, they're being done so well. Each of them is a spin-off series. Each of them could be a spin-off 6-part series on what happened to that woman doctor at the beginning. What happened? Did she get home? Right? Because like you said, they're giving so much screen time to everyone except Ellie and Joel. And they'll be there, so people will come and go, and we'll figure out who they are by interacting with them.
I just wanted to say I agree with Leandra. I also think he's a product of his socialization, right? Like up until this, disaster happens. And so I think it would be interesting if the lead character was a woman who was a mother. Would she behave the same? So it's hard, on your last episode, you talked about yourselves being in these positions, right? And we don't know how we would behave until we're in them. And I always like to think, that I actually probably wouldn't survive. I would die early because I'm going to stop and save those people along the road. And I'm going to like carry my dog through I'm going to try and save like everyone. But I think it would be interesting because you can't discount that socialization.
Right.
And so he's able to easily be that protector and that self-sufficient person, maybe in a way that others couldn't be. And he's going to survive. I haven't played the video game.
Okay.
So I'm like, he's going to survive, or at least for a long time, because of those. He is hard. He is able to make decisions in a way that I think like other people wouldn't. And I don't know if it's toxic masculinity, but I do think it is masculinity that kind of got him there.
I would agree with that too, in terms of like the difference between how he reacts and Tess reacts.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know Tess's backstory. Like, you don't really know anything else, but I do wonder if some of that socialization in terms of like the nurturing, the protecting the children, like that's, because women are socialized to listen.
They are.
Sit back and be empathetic. Like, I'm wondering now that you say that, like that probably plays a huge role in his like, shut it down, don't let it in, be pragmatic, don't think, just take her back, screw this, it's not worth it, versus Tess stepping back and being like, no, wait, like let's talk to her about how this happened, like, and she gets to know Ellie. I do think that you're right. I think a lot of that comes in just in how.
And Tess has a really great line, which I almost picked as my favorite line, where she was like, why can't we just think what would work out? Like, why can't we just be positive?
Yeah, yes.
Which is like a more female way of being. And he just shut it down immediately. Like, everything's horrible. This is a mistake. And she was like, can't we just be positive?
Just take the win, man. Take the win.
Yeah.
And she yells it at him, by the way. Right?
Yeah.
She's, why can't we just take the win for once? I mean,
especially knowing that at that point she's been bitten.
Yeah.
She knows it. And so it's like, do not give me a moment to
Yeah, that's the writing and the acting, because in that moment she doesn't say anything about what they did, but she says the shit we did. I mean, you know that they've been living a rough life, violent life in order to be where they are. And I thought that was very well done. So I'm going to get in trouble for this one. Would a 14-year-old behave the way Ellie is? In other words, the smartassery. I'm just going to call it the smartassery.
I'm not gonna lie. Like, when I was 14, if I had grown up the way she did, I mean, I was close to Ellie at 14 anyway. Like, you added an apocalypse. I mean, I think there's a bit of that's actually why I love how she's being portrayed, because it's very much like a snarky, really like the apocalypse doesn't get rid of teen angst. Like it doesn't.
So you're saying it amplifies it, right? I mean, she had to do something. She had to have something to be able to survive, just like they did. So that snarkiness, probably when you're not in a position of power, is probably involved in sustaining yourself. What I do like about what they did was that when the stakes get super duper high, she does shut up and listen. She does recognize when she's out of her element. And I'm glad they did that, because I don't know how long I'd be able to believe someone who would be super scared and just not understand that there are other people that know how to deal with this better than you do. So I will admit, as I found the snarkiness annoying as hell. It's like, shut up, man. That's who I am. I'm not saying she's a bad person. I'm saying, I would say, like, would you shut up, man? Like, be quiet.
She has a really great moment. Another one of my favorite moments was when she was like playing in the hotel, like that so yes, there's that annoying, right? Like, I have a lot of attitude teenager, but then it's like she really is just a kid, and she's playing even at 14.
Yes.
And so I love that they put that in there, because it reminded me, like, hey, she's in it. She's still innocent. She's still a kid. And she's in this like horrible situation, but she took that moment to stop and play and kind of like have some fun. Which really, like I said, I love this show because of the humanity. I was just like, that's what a kid would do.
Especially
when
they
don't tell. Go ahead, Leandra. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Like, how do you know? And she's like, I have books. And that's when you realize she's never actually seen a hotel. She's never actually seen how that plays out. So she's getting to play out what I'm sure has been taught to her was like a better time. Like, think of all these privileges that we used to have. You could check into this great place and like someone would take our bags. And so for her to, I think, like, imagine that, it was a wonder. And I loved it so much. Just the way she was like doing the accents and to your point too about like she does sort of shut up and let other people take control when she needs to. I tell people this all the time when I do crisis trainings in schools. I'm like, I know you think kids aren't going to listen, and I know you think that they're all just like going to run off and do their own thing. In a crisis, they know who to listen to as long as you're not acting afraid and you act like you know what you're doing. So those two things are what I really try to drill in, because you don't need to prepare kids to do all these things. They will listen to you in a crisis if you know what you're doing. And it's like that. I really enjoyed seeing that play out.
And they did not tell her to stop. When she went over, they didn't say, hey, get over here. She just went over, and they didn't, as if they were sort of enjoying it, that they were seeing something that they hadn't seen in a long time. And at the same time, those are the kind of behaviors that are going to get you deselected in a post-apocalyptic world. So I hope that snickery listening aspect of that relationship develops over the series, right? I will say that if they're gonna have the two of them together, and you're game players, so they probably are. One of the things that happens, personal experience, when you're in a situation with someone much younger, like my kid when she was 7, we were living together in another country for a while, you kind of become emotional equivalents. In other words, you are the parent, you are the caregiver, but you're both in a strange place. You're both not necessarily scared, but there's a level of, what's going to happen. And I just found myself becoming emotional equivalent, in the sense that her emotions were just as real and justified as mine. And we would share those experiences with each other over dinner. And man, when we got back, we were there for 6 months. When we got back, it was really hard for her to not live that way with me anymore. And she had to learn how to get back to being a teenager who's not in that kind of environment. And that took 6 months before she would just play, before she would just, go back to being 7 or whatever. So I hope they build on that, right? I hope that we see him giving her more emotional space that's non-judgmental. That would be kind of fun to see.
Oh yeah, because he's judgmental right now. You know what? The thing is that you can tell he had all those great skills with his daughter before. It was just the two of them.
Yes, you're
brother,
right.
Whatever, you know what I mean? Like
Yes.
he had that. He was really good at it. But he shut it down. I mean, very clearly, and he's not open to like going there again. So I think it'll be interesting to see how they let that play out, because in the show they're going to have a little bit more nuance, a little bit more time to play that out in the video game. That shifted. I'm interested to see.
No, I appreciate you just saying that, because I should have known that, because I saw the first episode and I saw that emotionally kind of equivalent relationship he had with his daughter when he recognized the emotional maturity of her getting that watch fixed. Right. So she was emotionally taking care of him. So there was a kind of codependency in their language in that first episode that he's not going to want to get back into, but desperately wants to. And yeah, that's fantastic. So part of what we said we were going to do on this podcast is talk about game playing experiences. Before I ask Leandra and Shelly to talk, I'm going to tell you that I went out and bought a PS5 this weekend and I started playing The Last of Us, and I will share my experiences with you guys after the professionals tell us their experiences of playing the game in relation to this episode. We'll start with Leandra.
So I'm playing it for the third time, like as we're watching it. So for those of you who don't know, like I watched the episode and then I play the game up through it. And what I found is really hard is stopping playing the game when I've caught up with the show. I've been really like pleasantly surprised how it lines up with like natural pauses in the game. And obviously there's a lot more going on in the video game that isn't happening on the show, because it's basically like trying to drill into you that this isn't an easy game and it's just going to kill you over and over and over again.
Yes.
One of the things I love that I'm hoping will come out is it reminded me of the laws of the clickers and what you can and can't get away with. The clickers are the ones that are blind and they like make that awful sound that keeps me up at night. The game was so like there was at one point a sprinkler came on and was on top of me, which caused the clicker to realize I was there, like little bitty things like that I just didn't, the second time you go through, a third time, technically. And one of the things I loved watching this episode and the turnaround of playing it is that the museum is perfect. It is exactly how it plays out in the video game. I mean, the way they walk across on the little wooden plank, the whole conversation, seeing the city, like Ellie, one of the things I love about Ellie is that she's seeing the world for the first time. Like she hasn't been outside the QZ, like she's seeing nature for the first time, really. So all of that felt really, really good. And the fear that I felt working my way through that museum in the game really played out really, really well in the show. And I just I really want to know what someone who's like lived in Boston thinks because of the way you get all these landmarks and stuff. So I absolutely loved it, and I'm very excited. I may have went a little further into what's
just a little. So how many times did you die this time?
I was like, I've played this so many times. I'm just like, it's fine. I put it on the hard mode. Like, I've got this. I literally turned it back to normal mode like within 5 minutes because I couldn't kill a clicker. I didn't have like in the game, it is a survivalist game. So you're having to like gather and scavenge and build things. And when I finally got my Molotov cocktail thing together, I was so excited, like burning everything. Turns out I am not a soft touch. I cannot sneak up on anything, so I just have to go in and hope for the best. So I play most of the like major battles at least 5 times
there you go.
I beat anything. I will say, oh no, that's the next episode.
That's the next episode. Okay, yeah. Cool. How about you, Shelly?
So I do not play video games for the very sheer fact that if I do play video games, I will not go to work. I will not, I can't do them and exist in the world. I do watch my husband play them, which is fun. And he did play The Last of Us. And I do want to say, thinking about like cities, so I'm from Pittsburgh, and he told me, you know, like they go to Pittsburgh. I'm excited to see it and how they did it. And I would love to be able to play the video game, but I would need a week where I didn't have to exist outside of my living room.
Yeah.
So I just can't. I have an addictive personality to certain things, and this is one of them.
I totally get it. Like I said last week, I used to get beat up playing Atari with my friends. I just didn't have it. Yet I actually do research on this stuff, right? On how planning affects where we see things on the screen and stuff. And so me playing the game, my last experience video gaming was trying to play Mortal Kombat. Okay, so for me, Street Fighter 2 was an amazing game because the relationship between the button presses and the things on the screen were quite direct, right? You just punch, 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 kick, 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 kick. But once I started playing Mortal Kombat, the things that were happening on the screen just didn't translate with my body movements, blah, 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 blah. But people who do it well, it all works out. I didn't do it well. So I'm playing this game. And first of all, I'm stunned by the quality of the graphics. I just haven't played a video game in a long time. Now, I didn't even all I did was get through the introduction. Because there's a scene where he's carrying his daughter and he's got to carry her down this little gully and then up to where the army is, I guess. I don't know what it is. And I think I got the zombie caught up with me like 10 times, and I'm playing easy. So then it's very hard to stop. As you said, it is very hard to stop. And one thing I got to say I love about the relationship between the show and the game, HBO decided to do this because the game is so good, because the story in the game is so good. And I'm pleased to see how much they're sticking to the story that was written in the game, because I'm just tired of people getting a hold of Neil Gaiman's American Gods and turning into something that it wasn't. And then the show gets canceled because they wouldn't just tell the damn story, right? So I don't even know how long it'll take me to catch up with the first episode, but it is a lot of fun, and I'm impressed.
Yeah, it's been nice too. Like, I think whenever we have a movie or a show, or there's like an adaptation of something that already exists, you always worry about like what they take out. And I think adapting a video game the way they're doing it here, they've actually allowed themselves ways to add to it, and give it that depth that you don't get in the gameplay. And so that has been refreshing. Like, they're not taking out pieces, they're focused more on like, how do we expand what's already there as opposed to redoing it. So like, I was really upset when they were like, not going to do the spores, which is like a whole mechanism that creates havoc for you. But like, logistically, pragmatically, it makes sense that wouldn't be realistic outside of a video game. So I love the care that they're taking with sticking to the heart of it. And when they do change or add something, they're very deliberate about it makes sense in the world. And they're now doing this after we've actually had a pandemic. I think they're able to actually tap in more of our fears, because people have them the way they didn't when the video game first came out. So that's been also really interesting. So I do have a question for you, Shelly, because you said that you didn't play the video game. Like, having seen other zombie movies, you said you were, kind of surprised about this one. So what is it about this one so far that seems to be working for you when others haven't?
That's a really good question. I like the characters. I like that we get some backstory into the characters, but then it also doesn't feel forced. They're like pairings. So sometimes when we've seen, or ones that I didn't like as much, it's like, okay, these people meet up and then bam, they're together. And then they're best friends, and then they're going to die for each other. And it's like, this ragtag team. And with this, it's like, well, I don't know, like, about, even though it's a kid, it's a 14-year-old, look, I don't know, like, about her. Like, it's a real interaction, because people don't just cling to each other and become best friends in the real world. I understand the pandemic and the apocalypse is different, but it feels more real where we're not going to trust certain people or people. One of the things I was thinking while watching this, I'm like, people are going to people are going to betray people. People are going to do horrible stuff to each other. It's real. And then they're still hanging people in, for ridiculous stuff, but like people are still behaving like people, which I liked. And I felt more connected to or more real. Like you said, Leandra, this could actually happen. And people are behaving the way that people behave when it's not the apocalypse. So that's why I've liked it so much, having not played the video game.
Yeah, I kind of wanted your take on that too, just because it is a different story. And I don't know about you. For me, for some reason, I'm more scared of a colonizing bacteria, not fungi, not bacteria, fungi, than I am of a virus. I think that also sets it up differently for me, and I don't know why. But I think you're right. Like the scene where they're hanging people for, leaving the QZ, like unauthorized, just like they left. A lot of people will say, "Well, that would never happen. We would never go back to that." And I'm like, "Yeah, we would." Yeah, we would in a heartbeat.
I think like in Walking Dead, they did a good job in the TV show portraying Rick as he had been portrayed in the comic, because Kirkman wrote him to be this protecting cop who wanted to reestablish moral human culture. And that's not who Joel is. And I like the difference in the show because of the differences in those characters. Rick got torn in all these moral directions, and then they just blew it and had him murder Negan's crew before Negan had done anything to him, and it just fell apart. Joel's going to take care of his immediate bubble, and he's not going to moralize to the whole crew about what they're supposed to do or not. They're supposed to survive. So I like starting from that position. And
Joel's a drug dealer. I was like, I liked it. I was just like, because that's real. That's what you would need to do to survive, and this, like, the Rick is a good example. Like, Rick's not going to sell drugs early on in the show. Joel, episode 2, here he is
selling drugs. Absolutely.
And I also Rick was also, he was emotionally manipulated by other people, and I don't see that happening with Joel. Like Tess even says, and I loved this. I think I said in the game, I loved at one point, the video game Tess says, I would think there's enough here for you to feel obligated. Yeah. To change that up a little bit. And Tess says, I accepted you wouldn't feel what I feel.
Yes.
Right. And I think that I think that gives us a good clue that Joel is not open to that emotional side of things. Whereas Rick was
all of Coral.
Coral. Which is good. I don't think one's wrong or right until Rick makes a decision to go kill Negan's people. Right. But I just think it's two different leadership styles. And it'll be interesting to see how it plays out as he starts to let his emotions get involved.
Yeah, I love it because the story in Walking Dead got drug around by Rick trying to recreate culture in a moral way. Joel's not going to do that. So the story's not going to get drug around that way. And we will see. Joel will probably run into people who are trying to recreate a moral world, and we'll see how he reacts and stuff. So I have a question for you both. I did find some interesting stuff online about the experience of playing the game and then experiencing the show as a violation of expectation versus reading a book and experiencing a show as a violation of expectation. And what I mean is, if I'm playing a video game, a lot of it I'm creating because I'm making decisions, I'm moving joysticks, and what's happening to my brain has a lot to do with what I have actually, how I'm moving in the world. With a book, I'm moving my eyes across a page and I'm creating the world in my head. Yet there's not the same visual input and the auditory input that make it that robust. So what do you think? Do you think people that play video games might feel more ownership over the story or be more likely to be upset if things change drastically versus someone that read a book? And if that question's a non-starter, I'm fine. I just thought it was a fascinating idea and the kind of thing I'd love to study.
I don't know. I'm kind of looking at you, Shelly. Like, I don't know how as someone who likes to read and do video games, I think when I read a book, part of it is I am imagining, like, even if they're describing characters to me, I have in my head what they look like. Like, I create that. And so to see what I created in my head not supported visually in like a movie, like I don't know. Like I don't feel as bad because I'm the one who created that. So I don't have the same expectations, but I do have that same ownership. Whereas in the video game, if it was an RPG, there'd be no way to keep anyone happy, because in an RPG, like, you make choices that completely changes the outcome of certain situations, entire
Right.
paths that you take. Someone wants to do an adaptation of an RPG, good luck making anyone happy. The Last of Us,
Right.
it is very, like, you are making decisions, you are playing through it, but you're not really making story decisions. And so
Well said.
you are playing it more interactive. So I can see your point. If you're more interactive, maybe you do take ownership. Like, in my mind, Joel is immortal and has died 5 times already.
Yeah.
And just keeps coming back,
Right.
or I play it until it's perfected. And so Joel kind of has a different
Yeah.
approach. But I don't know. I think that's a fascinating question. And I don't know. I do feel a lot of ownership of video games that I play. And I don't know if it's because of my history and like growing up
Right.
with it versus with books. I have a little bit more latitude, because you can never give a whole book. You can never do a book justice, because it becomes
Right.
so much bigger than just the author, right?
You're right. And the minute you put an image on a screen, you constrain the possible worlds people can create, right? Because it's that. And so there may be some individual difference here, where people who are higher on creativity might take ownership of their worldview of a book, because they're quote unquote really good at that.
Right. And I think that some of the things that you're talking about, Scott, is a lot of the fans being upset about Bella Ramsey playing Ellie. And it's like, yo, listen, like, Ellie literally looks a lot like Elliot Page, right? Like, Elliot Page is not going to play a 14-year-old girl.
Right.
No, that's not how this works. And there was even some controversy that they used Elliot Page's likeness for this. Like, Elliot Page came out, I was like, that's not really cool that, like, you didn't like put that, right? And so I think that capturing the spirit of Ellie is way more important than capturing what you see in your head or on your video game or whatever. And I think Bella Ramsey does an amazing job capturing the spirit of Ellie. And they need to just get over it. Get over it. Elliot Page is not going to play a 14-year-old girl. Get over it.
I love what you're saying here, because I think if the three of us were to take the big 5 personality inventory, we would be high in openness. We will be very high in openness and very open to difference. And I think the big 5 would probably do a good job of parsing out who's going to get pissed off when the world isn't what they thought it would be, right? So for me, because I study agency, it's like I got to do some kind of study where I got a video game people can play, I got a story they can read, and then I can match their, measure their dissatisfaction as they go through it. Because that's stuff I'm interested in, man. I don't know. It's just fantastic.
It would be cool to have people watch the show and then play the video game and see if the video game violates their expectations.
So that's me.
Yeah,
that's me. And I'm sitting there playing the game, and the truck scene is like the truck scene in the TV show. And it's, damn, they had a lot of respect for this. This is actually kind of an experiment, right? They're going to actually, seems like they're going to commit to camera angles. I mean, people are posting all kinds of stuff about matched up camera angles in the game and the show. And they're going to put a lot of faith in the quality of the story in the game and ride that. And good for them. I mean, I've not seen that done before, so it'll be fun. So how about you, Shelly? Video games, books, ownership?
So this comes up a lot, right? Fanboys, fangirls,
right.
get upset about. How I always look at it is you just have to see them as separate entities. And if you really, really love something, you still get to love it, even if they do something that you don't like. So I love the Hulk, right? I mean, the Hulk is my man. And so when they make things that aren't what I like related to the Hulk, which is a comic book, I have to just remember, it still exists. And I know video games are different. And I used to play video games. I had to give them up in graduate school. So I did play video games where I wouldn't leave the house and play them. And I understand the point. I do, because video games, I mean, you're devoting like hundreds of hours.
Yeah.
You're in it. You are the person. And yeah, it sucks if they do something you don't like, but you still get to love it. And that's how I try to think about things is, okay, maybe I didn't love that portrayal, but maybe that's somebody else's favorite portrayal. And I think, I try to be really positive in fandoms because everybody can love it.
Yes.
Even if you don't love it. Like I didn't love the Eric Bana Hulk movie. Like I didn't love it, right? And that really made me sad on opening day when I went to see a Hulk movie and I felt like they destroyed the Hulk. But then I was like, you know what? You still get to love the Hulk, right?
Yeah.
So if you don't love the Last of Us show, you still get the video game and you can play it and love it. I think there's enough for everybody to get to love everything. And that's my Care Bear answer.
That's the Care Bear answer. All right. Well, we'll put that in the header. We got a Care Bear answer in here for all of you. So, Shelly, why don't you tell people where they can find you on social media if you are so inclined?
Sure. At Dr. Clevenger on Twitter. And I'm going to give a shout out again to Department of Victim Studies at Sam Houston State University. We have a grad and undergrad degree completely online. So check us out.
Fantastic. Shelly, we're so glad you joined us on today's show. And we'll probably do an after party. And we'd love to have you come and debrief about how the series turned out.
Yeah.
How about you, Leandra? Where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Parris Leandra, at Parris Leandra, and that's it because I don't do social media.
She don't do that mess. No, I get it. You can find all episodes of Surviving The Last of Us and Dark Loops Productions on YouTube. If you want to make a comment or a question about the podcast, do so on the YouTube page or send an email to darkloopsproductions@gmail.com, and we'll be sure to read it and discuss it at the end of our next episode. So there it is. From all of us to all of you, big hugs, and remember, save who you can save. Bye-bye.